Hans, look, I'm a recorder player from way back, and you might not even know that.
And I don't even know that.
No, you didn't know that. So,
Yeah.
as I said, these interviews uncover things.
I know.
But anyway, it's not about me. But the thing that I remember, that if you play the recorder, it's not long before you have quite a collection of recorders.
That's true, yes.
And instruments. And it was certainly the case for me, and I think anyone who's keen on the recorder. So I mean, because I like to start from an unusual point with the interviews, do you have any idea how many instruments that you might own?
I was afraid you were going to ask me that, and I forgot to count. So quite a lot, but not as many as some. You know, I've always restricted myself to just what I really wanted and needed. So, of course, you start with your desk hand, and, you know, I went into these groups and stuff, and soon, because you're progressing, you go on to the treble and whatnot, and tenor, and then it gets expensive, of course. So before you buy any more, you have to know, A, what you want, and B, how you can finance it, yeah. And then for me, it was different because at one stage in my career as a recorder player, I drifted off with much encouragement from my teachers to play flute, and then baroque flute. And then because I got dystonia, I had to kind of reconsider, and I went back to recorder. So I have a huge gap in the purchasing power and process, where I bought flutes instead, which is also quite a selection. But yeah, look, I've got various desk hands and various trebles and various tenors and bass and great bass, and all of that, of course, in different pitches, because you play in 440, and normally for us nowadays we play in 415 with harpsichord, etc. So, and then there's the unusual sort of things like a voice flute or a charkan that I have acquired and all that sort of thing for. Yeah, out of interest, and because there's music for it.
Which of out of your huge collection? I mean, although you say it's not huge, it sounds pretty huge to the most of us. Do you have a particular instrument that really inspires you?
It changes a little bit from time to time, but I have to say that the most inspiring over the years has been, of course, the Fred Morgan original that I got after much ado in about 87. And of course he died, and I had several on order and I never got them. So then, because it's such, you know, as a maker, he's just got his own voice that is just so unique that he can give to an instrument. And it just hasn't stopped amazing me about what it can do.
So can you just tell the people who don't know about Fred Morgan a little bit about?
Well, so Australian maker in Daylesford, who's worked intensively, intensively really with Franz Bruggen and all those European guys, with their original collections of instruments, and he just fiddled around with bores and all kinds of detail, and came up with designs that are still unsurpassed today. I mean, there's fantastic recorder makers around now, but they're basically all based on his insights. Yeah.
So did he start off by copying other recorders?
He copied, the Franz Bruggen's originals in the first place. Of course, the originals are not always easy. They have survived a long time in the museum, and you need to play them a while until they even reveal themselves. And with the recorder, you've got hundreds of a millimeter tolerances in the upper windway sections. And if you see his designs that he did the drawings of the inner bores of instruments, they are as complicated as they all come out. And you think, oh, it's only because of the wood having changed and all that. You can only go in with a reamer and out with a reamer. But then, you know, tiny little adjustments inside the bore, etc., and in the undercutting of holes make all the difference. And then, of course, there's the voicing of the upper part, which is any maker's secret, really. So mine took about 3 years of back and forth. Can you do this? Can you do this? Still not doing that very well, no? Until it was settled and how I wanted it. And ever since then, it has been stable.
And the thing is, they're susceptible to temperatures and moisture.
Yeah,
and so
but
on. They have
it's
character.
weird because you take them to Europe, you take them here. All my instruments sound better in Europe. Hate to say it, but it's true. We always discover that.
Yes.
I don't know what it is, humidity or what, but also, different seasons, they sound differently. All that. So you need to work with that, and of course the upkeep is crucial as well, the oiling and, cleaning.
So do you have set aside a day every few months or whatever to oil your instruments, or do you work like that?
Used to do it once a year.
Right.
Flutes and everything went into the oil.
Yes.
So, which is a fabulous smell goes through the house and everything. And then afterwards, first of all, they don't sound at all.
Yes.
Because it takes a while. And then all of a sudden, whoa, different sound. Yeah.
Yes.
And some you need to leave alone for a while, and they come back to life. So they really have a life of their own. And also, I worked for a long time when I was the flute playing self with Rudi Tutz in Innsbruck, who's actually made a living off clarinets and other woodwind instruments for Vienna Phil and all that. He made their oboes and whatnot as well, and maintained them. And he got together with Bart Kuiken on copying flutes. Anyway, so we worked together a lot. I was in Innsbruck every time that I went to Europe. And he said, look, whoever plays the instrument makes all the difference. Because he gives people their instruments, he listens to you when he makes them. He says, play, play, play. And then he does something to it that is uniquely for you. But then also, he says, they change with how you play them. And I remember I'd picked up a flute, which was an exact same copy that I had of somebody else who played in orchestras and stuff. And I blew into it and made this enormous sound. I'm going, what is this? They said, well, yeah, it's being played in orchestras. Exactly the same instrument as mine, different sound. Mm-hmm. So oiling, playing, all of that comes into it. They are alive, those things.
We're very lucky, aren't we?
We are. I mean, I'm very happy that it's such a relationship with the instrument that you have. And I even think, we don't think about it like that, but silver flutes have their own life as well.
Yes.
So, anyway.
So, how did music start for you?
Yeah, I was wondering about that in the lead up to talking to you. There was nothing on the cards for me with music, I don't think, because nobody in the family was really into music. Other than me discovering 2 recorders in the cupboard, which hadn't been played a long time, my mother's, one black, one brown, and a tuning device, blow-in device for a guitar, which wasn't a guitar but a lute that was on the wall. One of those lutes from the 20s that have a guitar fingerboard, and just a lutey kind of body.
Yes.
So, with a crack in the bell and everything. So there was nothing much there to start with. And then how it started, I think year 3 or 4, I can't remember, at school, the guy who was building up the local music school in my hometown came to our school to promote, and said, who would like to come to record a group? And I don't know what rode me, but I put my hand up. So that's how it started. So I went into record a group with 6 or 7 other people. Not long after, because I did well, I was promoted to the elite quartet, and then just passed through the ranks. So that's how it started, and I never stopped.
So that's how it started, but at what point did you get excited by it? Was it when you
I
saw
was
the brown
pretty
and black?
excited right away because I could do it all.
Yes.
It was just too easy for me at the beginning. And people encouraged me, and the same guy who came to promote, who later became my piano teacher as well, every time I came to piano lesson, of course I hadn't practiced because I was playing recorder, right? He had this huge array of music, And he always said, "Oh, you haven't practiced. Did you bring your recorder?" "Oh, yeah." "Okay, get it and pull out something. Let's play." So he accompanied me.
So that's a real incentive never to practice the piano, isn't it?
Well, funny enough, I did to a degree because I was interested in it. But yeah, not quite. I always stayed longer. And we became really good friends after that anyway, so I followed him around. And, you know, he had so much experience. And one of those people at the time, everybody said, "Oh, tell a month, you know, it's just volume, but not quality, it's quantity stuff." He had the whole recorder editions of Telemann sonatas, etc. And then I befriended a flute player, and we did a lot of Christmas gigs and all that. So we just played through repertoire. And I think by that time I was, you know, gone, basically.
So
yeah, I'm doing music,
You were
and that's
immersed in
it.
the recorder and you were playing piano, but what sort of music were you listening to?
Good question. Bit of an eclectic selection. I wasn't much into pop and contemporary until my grandmother gave me a Beatles record. I didn't listen too much to baroque music because I was playing it most of the time. And then my parents had some selections. We had a 10 LP changer, you know, one of those big stereo thing when they were not quite around yet. And there was a magic flute recording, very beautiful, with the likes of Schwarzkopf and people singing. Klemperer, I think, the recording. Bruch Violin Concerto got me really early in a fantastic recording with Joan Field. If you can find it, everybody listen to it. She's Berlin Radio Orchestra or something. And then I went totally off on Beethoven. I went out and you could buy $5 LPs of vinyls with one symphony, you know, or violin concerto or something. So that was it, basically. So I was always interested in lots of different stuff. Oh, not to forget Gluck Orfeo with the big flute solo in it.
Of course. And were you at that point tempted by the modern flute?
No, not immediately. I don't know what I was tempted by in terms of I just played recorder and so, you know.
Yes.
I got interested. Some people said, "Oh, you need to." First of all, I was made to play piano, yeah, because everybody said you need to. That's just part of it. Then, oh, what else can the boy do? Maybe violin would be good. And my recorder teacher at the time said, "Oh, I have a violin you can try out on. My brother played it in the orchestra. He died, and I've just got it lying around." You know. Big revelation when I looked inside and it said Guarnerius. My father said, "I think that's quite famous." I never knew if it was real or not, but it was a great violin, but I didn't know. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So kept with the recorder, and then we used to do holiday summer schools with different music schools where we all get together and play. And I was good friends with a number of flute players. I tried, and I could do it quite well to a degree. You know, I've always struggled with it, but she lent me an instrument. And then it didn't come to much until I went to university. I started education degree. And my recorder teacher was famous recorder virtuoso, the Dolmetsch of Germany, really, Ferdinand Konrad. He said, "Oh, you're interested in flute? I've got one in our early music selection of instruments. Huge, you know, big as this room full of instruments." And there was a pretty crappy so-called baroque flute, and I played it for a number of things, for chamber music. And he said, you should really do this because you're good at it, sort of. He said, "But I want you to do a proper flute degree first." So there's nobody to study baroque flute with at the time in the area. So he said, "Look, we do a double degree, you do recorder for a different degree, and you do your education degree, continue with modern flute." So that's what I did. And then after that, I went to study with Bart Kuiken in The Hague to do baroque flute. That's how it went for me. You know, it's like I had a number of really considerate teachers who passed me through the ranks and pointed me in directions that I didn't know about.
Just backtrack for a second. You started on an education degree.
Yeah.
Was that because you saw yourself becoming a teacher, or was that you doing that?
I didn't know what to think at the time. It was mainly my parents' security blanket to let me do this at all, I think.
Yes.
Seeing my mother was devastated that I wouldn't become a dentist. And so it was basically, oh yeah, you can become a school teacher. Yeah. So I did this degree where you can teach at high school, basically. All separate degrees. And the degree that I then added was one special instrumental teacher degree. So
in hindsight, it was actually useful.
It was all useful because education was the most extensive degree you could do, because I learned conducting, I had piano, I needed to do violin for a little while just to know about up and down bars and how to tune it. So it was the best degree I could go to. I mean, you know, I was totally lost in philosophical lectures and all that because I had trouble reading all the very difficult German until I made a bit more of an effort. But it was definitely the best course of study, yeah. Yeah.
So you progressed through these, really the who's who of recorder players, you know, as teachers, didn't you? And baroque flute? Sort
of. Baroque flute more so, I'd say. At the time, you know, it was all really still building up. So I feel very much, and funny enough, Bart Kuiken once said that to my mother, Hans is very much a pioneer.
Yes.
So I probably was never on the trajectory to be this big solo player or whatever, but always kind of trying things out and checking things out as to where to go. Yeah. So in Germany they had these summer courses in Bremen at the time, where Gustav Leonard, Arnoncourt, and all those, you know, coryphees at the time went and taught, and Bart Kuiken as well. So that's where I went to study with them. And, you know, you sat together afterwards and talked and drank and all that. It was all very collegial and beautiful. So I got to know them all, you know. Franz Bruggen, not so much, because I then ended up in The Hague, and he was teaching in Amsterdam, and he was drifting away from the recorder to conducting at that time anyway. But he came and gave some classes, and it was like, you know, mind-boggling, of course. Yeah. So I met a lot of people who then, you know, became so famous yes. and who were real people, and that always grounded me quite a lot, I think.
Yes. And once you finished your study, well, in some ways, I think you probably have never finished your studying.
No,
yes.
Actually, I got much better when I stopped studying. Honestly, yeah. Because I was far too tied up, in, you know, yes. having to achieve.
Yes.
And ever since, I've done stuff with modern flute that I'd never thought I would do, because things come together, and it's so enlightening when you start thinking, wow, I've been thinking about this all my life, and here it is, you know.
Yes, I mean, it's quite ludicrous, isn't it? You think that a music degree is condensed into 3 or 4 years.
You know, and people often say to me, why didn't you do a PhD? And I'm going, well, in Germany, where I grew up, people did their PhD when they're old, you know. Yes. Yeah. So their experience, of course, that's all changed now. But yes. yeah, I could actually do it now because I know.
Yes.
In a way. I can say that with all humility, but yes. somehow when I talk about something, it kind of makes sense in there, which I've never had the feeling of before. I'd always been searching. You know. So yeah, you learn a lot more after, but of course, studying and all that information that you assemble and the exchanges that you have with other people, I think, put the groundwork into your brain to then synapse so long as you live, you know.
Yes.
So yeah, for me, it's all a bit of a gray zone from back then, but I really have learned through life, I think.
Yes.
I'm quite happy where I am.
So, putting aside the formal study,
yeah.
The transition for musicians from is difficult. But you went into teaching, didn't you?
It's always been a passion of mine.
Yes.
I taught very early on when I actually taught the group that I started in a music school, basically. Yes. So I was about 16 or something, got special permission to teach. Yeah, it's always been something that, I don't know what it is, the exchange with other people and seeing how other people progress and how they adopt what you tell them, which also means I've always been very observant in how I've been taught in all kinds of different ways. You couldn't say there was any one method, but they were all important in my development, basically. So now, it's just become second nature, and it's always been something to fall back on for my own sanity, yes. Financially often. But basically, it's been an important part of it, and I don't think I could have existed just as a player. In that way, I'm not extreme enough or determined enough that, I must play all the time. In fact, I like rehearsal. To this day, I like rehearsal better than the performance still, because that's where the exchange and the experimentation,
Yes, so I think that's very, very true. So was it a big decision to come to Australia?
It flowed, basically. I mean, I had met so many Australians in The Hague. There were people studying in all the departments. I came for a long visit of friends that I'd made, and there was a perspective of a job maybe, So, and then I came and immediately got into, it was to Melbourne at first. Melbourne Uni, tutoring, people were very welcoming. So it wasn't as big as it looks, even though, of course, there were all kinds of things to consider, and I often had the pull to go back, get a proper job or something, yes. And not fight so much. It was yes. A fight at the time, because the early music community was pretty small. But I also met so many terrific people. So it's all good, really.
And you worked closely with someone who, Jan Stockard.
With Jan, yes. Jan, she's my absolute hero.
Yes.
Heroine, whatever.
Yes.
To this day, she just had a very big birthday and she's still going strong. I met her and her then husband, of course, who's German. Funny that his name was Jan, which is Jan. Yes. So they swapped in a way. And she played baroque oboe and he played baroque bassoon. And we did some orchestral stuff together. I was conducting. And then she was in the ABB at the time. She got me to do stuff there. And we got very close. And then she went to Dresden and did all this research on the Zelenka, which is just unbelievable. Digging up water damage, not fire damage, but from extinguishing fires, you get water damage, so it's double whammies on the manuscripts.
Yes.
And she found these Vespers settings and all that. So we did for the Festival Organ Harpsichord in Melbourne, we did a first performance of some of these Vespers. And which was just, just working on it was unbelievable. And the forces at the time that we had in early music players was still relatively limited. So it was probably by today's standards a little bit on the rough side. But to get this music back to life.
So what sort of time gap before it had been performed previously?
Well, I guess first half of 18th century, yes. Composition, performance, as usual, probably then put into the archives after a few performances. 200 and something.
It's unthinkable, isn't
it? It's unthinkable, but there's so much of this music that is still going through that process. There's still people who dig stuff up, and it's not as bad as you think. And Zelenka was much better than you think. Yes. And then I did the same thing when I came to Sydney. I had the fortune to work with the Sydney Chamber Choir for a couple of years as conductor, And we did the same thing again and dug up some of those. And that was, Jan tells me that is still a performance that she plays in her lectures, and people are very convinced by it. So it was worth it, definitely. Great music. Yeah.
Now, we were talking before we started the interview about a very special time here at the Sydney Conservatorium with a group of young ladies.
Yes, and I was scraping for names and everything, but
yes,
it's a long
time. You don't have to
ago.
name them all.
No, I will not.
Just tell them all that you love them a lot. But,
yes, well,
it was a very special time, wasn't it? It was a
yeah.
sort of coming of age, because I mean,
Sure.
you mentioned earlier, you know, the sort of continual fight in the early music era.
Fight.
But, yeah. I mean, I know it's a dramatic word, but
Sure.
I mean, it's just trying to convince people that it's, you know.
Yeah, well, in a way, with recorder you don't have to do that much convincing.
Yes.
It's more that recorder really, and then once people hear it, they are relatively convinced right away. Yeah.
Yes.
When you talk about this is a baroque flute, people go, but it's not as good as a modern flute, really, you know, because it's this modernist thinking.
Yes.
Recorders are still recorders.
Yes.
And you can play early music on them. And as we discussed before, you know, more than 50% maybe of repertoire nowadays is contemporary. So you can do a lot more than just playing, you know, your usual recorder stuff.
Yes.
So in a way, I discovered all this with my students, because for a while there I was still half flute, half recorder player or something, and then that changed. And those girls, there was only a couple of boys, really did such good work. You know, they came from just very humble beginnings in a way, and worked really, really hard with me on discovering the repertoire and the possibilities. So, yeah, it's good. And they're all in good spaces now,
Yes.
all in their different niches. Be it academia or performance.
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
So I'm quite happy. We're all good friends. We had most famous and infamous recorder parties at my place. You never came. Yeah, we were still trying to revive one only recently, but I don't have the energy.
I know this is a secret recorder business, but
Yes.
what happens at a recorder party that doesn't happen at a brass party or
I don't know. It's probably very similar now that
Yeah.
you mentioned brass.
yes.
But you know, it was just the companionship and stuff. We
Yes.
had just a lot of fun, and it was definitely not about recorder.
Yes.
It was about everything else, you
Yes.
know. And just having a really, the companionship was probably the most important
Well,
in that.
you
yeah.
have played such an important part in so many people's lives. Through your
I
work.
hope that, you know, they don't look
Yes.
back and say, oh,
They don't.
Whatever.
They don't. Whatever. And so.
I have never been so confident within myself, because I always think there's so much else to learn
Yes.
that I never kind of think, oh yeah, you know,
You
it
haven't
was all
quite got
good.
all the answers yet.
But if I give you the tools to go further, then
Yes.
that's my job done.
Now,
I think.
you sort of say jokingly, and you know it's not true, and I know it's not true, that you're retired, ish. But,
Ish, yeah.
Ish. But you're still here at the Conservatorium, and you're still involved with lots of different things. Do you have a sort of bucket list of things that you would love to be able to do?
Musically.
Yes, musically.
You ask carefully.
I'm not talking about
Look, I don't know. I have, in all seriousness, started to say no to things now, and I'm doing a few last performances, Elton John style.
yes.
I just don't want to go beyond my use-by date, and so I don't want to mess up. And I've had a few instances where I didn't mess up, but I found that the fire was gone a little, and I don't want to do it as a routine. So I want to be fully there when I'm playing. So yes, I'm saying no to things. I'm still doing some things or the other, and I'm still teaching. But yeah, I think it's a good time now, and there aren't many students at the moment. So I'm seeing through the one I've got now, the
Yes,
one and all.
yes.
and doing some performance workshops to work with other people, of course. Bucket list. Not really. When I go to concerts, which doesn't happen very often, because I'd rather be there by myself when I listen to music in a way and not meet other people,
Yes.
It's too personal. I often think, I should have done more conducting. I really should have, because give me that baton and I'll do it, But then when you're in the situation, there's much more more connected with conducting, of course, that you would need a little bit more practice for. But yeah, I sometimes think conducting would be great.
Yes.
And I know why Franz Bruggen went to conducting, because what he did with Beethoven in his time was quite groundbreaking.
Yes.
So that sort of thing is kind of in the back of my mind, but I don't need to do it.
And
It's
just
in the head.
two last questions. What music do you listen to now?
Good one. I've always listened to a whole gamut of music, and probably more outside the Baroque somehow, even though some things in the Baroque still fascinate me, like a Lully opera or something like that, yeah. Romantic stuff, the more intricate, Brahms. Big fan of Strauss, of course. And just lately, because through jobs at AIM and through other places, I've done a bit of work with the music theatre department. And so I'm now going listening to musicals and contemporary things, and I'm discovering how beautiful and how well that is done in Australia. I'm just bowled over by it, how good those people are in the band and the singers and what they do. So it changes. It might be a fad for me, but I'm really at the moment totally into that scene, and there's stuff to discover.
That's great. And the final question is, do you think your mother, who was so hoping you'd be a dentist, would be proud of young Hans?
I never quite know, but you don't know my mother. She was a very careful and anxious lady, being the generation that she was in. Even her mother said, she's just too careful. I think so, at heart. It's more the worry if I'm doing well, if I'm able to survive, and obviously I've survived this far, so she rests in peace, I hope.
So you don't get to take up dentistry at this time?
It's a bit late.
I'm glad about that.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Hans.
Thank you.